Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we've touched upon this in increasing frequency when we talk about the night of the long knives as it relates to the Biden administration and the New York Times. I mean, I don't know, I'm actually at a loss for words. It was a devastating, like, 6-article attack from insiders within the Biden administration that was just devastating. Your comments.
Yeah,
And what does
really
this mean?
was. And for those of you who have not seen this article, it's basically political insiders are saying Joe Biden is way too old to run for re-election. He's not competent. And the fact of the matter is,
just real quick, even things like, just real quick, to set it up, and I'll let you go, is that things like, and the New York Times didn't have to publish this. It shows there's just more than a factual situation here. There's a real momentum to get rid of this guy. They talk about that his crew, the people within the administration, are scared or are very concerned when he walks on stage. He's going to trip over a wire.
Yep.
Not good.
I mean, as we record this, he's on his way to the Middle East, and this was Israel first, then Saudi Arabia, and this was a trip that was supposed to take place immediately after the G7 summit in Europe, but they had to move the trip because the two trips back to back were too much for him to handle.
Well, I'm not so sure this is going to be up in his bailiwick. I mean, he's becoming increasingly frail. We talked about this 3 weeks ago on the podcast. I don't want to be premature, but if this trip doesn't go well, it's just another nail. I mean, it's a big nail in the coffin. If he, let's say in Israel or in Saudi Arabia, he might not have as much control of the press. They start asking him tough questions. If he flames out, if you will, I think it could be, no pun intended, toast. And also, what kind of reception is he going to get, in particular, in Israel or in Saudi Arabia? Are they going to roll out the red carpet, or are they just going to kind of temper things?
Neither one of those countries is all that happy with him. I mean,
no.
Every time he opens his mouth, he aggravates more situations. Right now, you've got people on both sides going, okay, electing this idiot was a mistake. Now, we've seen the polls. I believe it's 88% disapprove of him. Yes. When was the last time 88% of Americans agreed on anything? I mean,
I'd say maybe never.
Yeah, that's how bad this is. Now, let's also remember that we're using the word agree very loosely, because 30% of that 88% think he didn't go far enough to the left, while the other 58% believe he went too far to the left. So,
and that's but you point to his big predicament. If it was on either way he goes, he's screwed. There's increased rumblings about the far left putting their own, even AOC's been meant, believe it or not, she'll turn 35 in 2024. But the point is, damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Correct?
Absolutely. And what they don't seem to realize is that most of his problem is because he's kowtowed to the left. If he had been centrist Joe Biden, which was how he campaigned, which is how most of his career has been. I'm not saying he's the brightest bulb in the box,
no,
but he has always been relatively centrist. If he had stayed a centrist, this would not be happening. But he went all the way to the left, kowtowed to the liberals in his party, who, again, Democrats are now calling them out, saying that they are not the party's mainstream. But they are mostly...
Yeah, but, it was a deal with the devil.
Yes.
It was Bernie Sanders was actually, or Elizabeth Warren was going to win. Even Biden didn't think he was going to win. He kind of did that for other reasons that aren't really important. But the point of it is, no one thought he was going to win. It looked like Sanders, which would have been a disaster. So I think the deal with the devil was that you play ball with us and we'll let you be president. And I really do believe that happened.
And it just goes to show you just how much the Democrats are more about keeping their power than they are about doing what's right for the country. They kowtow to a small minority of the country, and it's been an abject disaster. No, even Biden proponents can't name anything he's done well.
No, but speaking of power and the Democratic Party, because it's essentially all they have been since, I would say, the mid 70s, especially after Reagan. That's all they were scared to. That they had power since FDR, Reagan, the Reagan Revolution changed all that. They got scared shitless, and ever since then, at every level, it's about power. And it's also reflective in something that you brought up to me as we were preparing for the show. A lot of that in the rescue plan doesn't go for any it rescues nothing but wokeism. And if the Democrats were really concerned about the hurting masses, they wouldn't be doing that, would they?
No, only 10% of the money in the American Rescue Plan went to COVID-related situations. It's now coming out that they gave a whole bunch of money to libraries and museums, not so they could survive the pandemic, but to create anti-racist tours, is how it was phrased. Basically, they wanted libraries and museums to push CRT, primarily because even at that point, parents were rebelling because they saw it in the school system because everybody was being taught remotely. And there was a huge backlash against it being taught in schools. So now they go, oh, well, we got caught in the schools. How else can we force this on America?
Okay, but I need to ask you this question, Dr. Lopkin. You're right on with everything you've just said. However, why do they continuously double down? In Virginia, the gubernatorial race was won because of exactly what you're saying, okay? So why are they continuously doubling down? And there's an old adage, you never interfere with a mother and her cubs. It's the same thing with soccer moms, you name it, suburban moms. You start screwing with their kids, it ain't going to work out too well. Okay, so yeah, schools, that's the center point. I get that. But even in live, I mean, they look at this and they go, this party is completely mashugana. And I'm also looking at, that over 50% of Hispanics who are very religious, very Catholic, disapprove of Biden. Not so long ago, Hispanics were maybe, 70% in favor of any Democrat.
Yeah, the flip in Hispanics has been absolutely
monumental.
Amazing. But you were asking why they keep doubling down, and I will actually tell you there was a book called Rules for Radicals, and this came out
Alinsky.
in 1971. Yes, Saul Alinsky. And this laid out the plan that they are still following to this day. And they don't care about America. This was all about how they could brainwash people, how they could convince them their way was the best way. Well, the fact of the matter is, their way has failed time and time again, and they refuse to accept that. In fact, we talk a lot about CRT, but for another one of the Ex Vadio podcasts, we actually did some research into how CRT started. And it was a study to find out why liberal policies did not have the effect they were expected to have. We've talked on this podcast a number of times how Lyndon Johnson's Great Society actually did more harm than good. Well, in this study, the one conclusion that they refused to consider is the fact that the policies themselves were flawed.
Yeah, but isn't it at least indirectly related to the fact if it's these Lewinskyeites, the New Democratic Socialist Party. Most of these people have never worked. AOC was a bartender, okay? They've never been in real business. So there's no direct correlation between success and failure. A theory that sounds good is as good as something that works. Isn't it true?
That's pretty much
As
how
long as it sounds
they
good.
see it. Yes. They
Well,
they want you to be dependent on government. That is their agenda, because that way they have control over what you do. I mean, remember, the same politicians that are yelling now that a woman should not have anybody tell her what she can do with her body are the same politicians that 1 year ago were yelling everybody has to get vaccinated whether they like it or not. So the
I have to correct you on one thing, Dr. Lopkin. It's not women, it's people who give birth.
Yeah, right. It's birthing people.
Birthing people, I'm sorry.
Especially according to the NEA. Yes.
There you go. Unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, when you talk about the night of the long knives, you just know that things are just imploding on Biden and his administration. We have Snoop Dogg, who enjoys marijuana, to say the least, and I guess has his own brands of marijuana, whatever they are. Just came out with Sleepy Joe marijuana. Snoop Dogg, Sleepy Joe. Smoke a little, and you won't know where you are, and that's the fact. That shows you when you become a caricature in, let's just say, in mainstream society. That's not a good thing.
That's it. I mean, when Trump would do something, Saturday Night Live would go after him in the cold open. But this is business people going after him. I mean, Jeff Bezos takes him on constantly. This is the American mainstream who are going, no, you know what? You are a living joke.
And that's true. But that's something that is kind of needs more articulation, because how did it happen? I mean, Bezos supported Biden. I know the illusion and the reality are different, but there has to be. They want him out. Isn't that not the case? And the only reason I mentioned this Snoop Dogg, if it was not politically, socially cool to diss Biden, he wouldn't be doing it. Okay, it's all about making money. It's all about being cool. It's now cool to diss Biden, even in the mainstream culture.
Yeah, he's become a living joke, because I think most of the Biden supporters during the 2020 election, I mean, one, they just wanted Trump out, but two, they were deluding themselves about Biden's mental condition. The rumors of his dementia, it's Russian misinformation, because that's the story the media fed us. Now,
wait, I just want to interject one thing. Sometimes as humans, you see what you want to see. I believe that most people looking at him, getting the ice cream, and he's half out of it with the aviator glasses, knew, even in the Democratic debates, they were laughing at him in the Democratic debates. Women's rights, you got to punch at it. You got to punch at it. They actually started laughing. So I guess the point is, there was so much fervor, anti-Trump fervor, that it was anything but Trump. And you want something to look good, guess what? It'll look good.
That's it. They wanted Biden to look good. They believed, because they wanted Trump out so bad. And they knew if they had run Bernie Sanders or they had run Elizabeth Warren,
goodbye,
independents were not going to vote for either one of them. So they put their faith in Biden, and now they've reaped what they sowed.
And I do believe that you talk about Bernie. It's Bernie, not AOC, that has been the most destructive political figure in recent American political history.
Well, honestly, without Bernie, there wouldn't have been an AOC.
Exactly. He started out, it was a cool little sideshow. Even 20 years ago, Bernie from Vermont, blah, blah, blah. The
the old guy, you're like your uncle at the table who's always bitching about what's going on, and the destruction that he's created in the Democratic Party and beyond is maybe immeasurable.
It really is. It has been absolutely amazing how he has ripped the party apart. And essentially, what he did was he took the Socialist Party and brought them into the Democrats in order to split that party apart. Because let's face it, mainstream Democrats, and I'm not talking about even some of the politicians, but mainstream Democratic voters are not these left-wing wackos. They are more centrist Democrats. Yes, they're left of center, but they're closer to the center. So Bernie brought in the socialists, what they were calling for a while the Bernie Bros, and had them all register as Democrats. Well, they're not Democrats. This has been a coup to take over the party, and it seems to be succeeding.
It's very much succeeding.
The problem they're facing, though,
Dr. Lopkin, though, that your insights are amazing, absolutely pivotal to the show. But I have to say, you've said this several times, mainstream that's kind of almost getting to be an oxymoron, isn't it?
Well, no, because mainstream Democrats are still out there. And in fact,
okay. I see them less and less.
Because they're not as vocal as the wacko contingent. And the same thing happened to the Republican Party during the days of the Tea Party. You still had a more centrist, mainstream section of the party, but you didn't hear from them because the Tea Party drowned them out. Now you've got the socialists drowning out the mainstream Democrats. And in fact, there have been a couple of speeches lately where Democrats have called out these left-wing wackos and said, you are out of touch with the mainstream Democrats. They are starting to fight back because they've seen their party decimated by these idiots.
Okay, you need to elaborate on that. What happens, by the way, before we get into it, let's get into set this up by what have you heard about the midterm projections, and if it does go that way, what happens to the Democratic Party 2 years before the national election?
Well, the latest results of the heat maps that are out, they have the Republicans winning the House fairly easily, I believe, not by a lot. But I believe they're supposed to have, a 7-seat majority is what's expected on the low end. But that's enough to take the House. In the Senate, the Republicans are expected to win 53 seats to 47 seats.
Critical.
Yeah. So it is looking like the Democrats are going to lose both houses, not by runaway scores like during the Obama administration, although there's still time. The Democrats can still shoot themselves in the foot further.
Oh, no, see, things are fluid. I right now, a snapshot, I get it, Lopkin. Yeah. But you get the inflation report coming out a little later. At the end of July, if we truly are in a recession, that could be blown up immediately.
Oh, absolutely. Between the inflation rate, gas prices, wages, they've been going up, but not nearly as fast as inflation. If we hit a recession, those unemployment numbers are going to be turned upside down because companies are going to stop hiring. They're going to stop creating new jobs. And in many cases, they're going to start laying more people off in preparation for a recessionary economy. All of that happens. This is going to be remind in front of people every time they go to the gas station, every time they go to the supermarket. That is what's going to hammer into them over the next several months. So, yes, this is a snapshot, but it doesn't mean that the Democrats are just going to lose that. Their losses could still be even a lot more.
Okay, if the midterm goes as a quasi tsunami, is it lights out for Biden? I say it is. It's almost. I mean, it's flickering right now.
It's like, already lights out over for Biden.
It's over.
He's
right.
He's a lame duck. I mean, remember, even controlling the House and the Senate, he barely got things passed, and then only through reconciliation. So
yeah, and the other thing is, there's one other thing. He hasn't done a press conference since February. That's quite a while ago, like 6 months ago.
Yeah,
he's been removed from the stage. Yes, there's the actual shit that's going on, and there's also optics. When you have to, especially you have a note card, sit on a chair, please don't fart, don't shake with people with imaginary hands, imaginary people. It doesn't reflect well.
That goes back to the New York Times article. Why is the media now turning on him? Because he's not answering their questions. They elected him to be their boy, and he's not playing ball with them. He's not giving them press conferences. He's not giving them interviews, and they're pissed. Well, there's an old saying going back to the newspaper days: never pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel. That's what's going on now. He did not give the media what they expected and what they wanted, and now it's their turn to throw a temper tantrum.
100%. And also, they are the operatives of the Democratic Party, the tools of the Democratic Party, and the Democrats know if he's up for re-election in 2024, it ain't going to look good. But I still say this: I'm still very pissed and concerned about Trump. We prepared before the show. There was a poll that I saw that he's down by 3. And I know I even mentioned another poll. You just saw it. He's up by 3. My cat Carl is up by 15.
Yeah, the problem
it's not
is
good.
The problem is up or down. It's within the margin of error, which means it's a toss-up. Unfortunately, another poll of likely Republican voters right now still puts Trump 3 points in front of DeSantis, and both he and DeSantis are something like 10 to 15 points in front of the nearest competitor. So he's still getting that support from within the Republican diehards. Now,
yeah, but he's only 3 points ahead here's what I really believe, and I truly what?
He's 3 points ahead of this. Yes.
Yeah. Here's what I really think is going to happen: Iowa or New Hampshire, those early primary states. If DeSantis breaks through, I think it's going to be like water through the dike. I think it's going to be the okay to abandon Trump. I believe that, truly 100%.
That's very possible. The other thing that you have to remember is that at this point, at this point in the H.W. Bush administration, at this point in the W. Bush administration, nobody knew about Bill Clinton. Nobody knew about Barack Obama. So there is still the possibility of an incredibly strong candidate coming out and taking the party by storm.
The Republican Party. Yes. Because I don't see that in the Democratic Party.
The Democrats actually have a very shallow bench.
And old. It's basically on life support, literally.
Well, that's actually the problem, is that the party is so split among age. The mainstream candidates are much older. There's a lot of concern about them. They do have a lot of young blood. The problem is this young blood is the wacko left contingent. They are never going to be able to win a general election, because winning a general election is not about party loyalists. It's about the independents. And in fact, right now, According to voter registrations, 58% of the country identify as independents, not Democrats or Republicans. That's the people who are going to decide these elections. The more the Republicans swing to the right, the more the Democrats swing to the left, the more they're going to alienate those independents.
Can I throw out one person I've thought about? He's not young, but brilliant, top of his class at Harvard. How about Ted Cruz?
There's a lot of possibility about Ted Cruz.
And his endorsements have gone well. He's brilliant. He's not a pussy. He'll go head to head with Trump after learning about 2016. I think that's a possibility.
He is a possibility. He's not really talked about much right now. I believe he was in that group of Republicans that, Trump and DeSantis are just way ahead of. But he does have his good public name recognition. He is, however, a Democratic boogeyman. Anytime the Democrats want to scare people, they go, well, this is what Ted Cruz wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
That can work for him, and that can work against him with independents. And again, it's that independent block that you've got to win.
Good point. Now, moving on, and I'll let you kind of focus on this. The Musk Twitter dance, I'll call it. Update our listeners on your, for the kind of an overall synopsis and your kind of takeaways from it.
Yeah, Musk officially pulled out of the Twitter purchase because Twitter refused to give him access to the numbers of fake accounts. They swear it's under 5%. He's pretty sure it's closer to 30-40%, possibly even as high as 50%, which makes the company a lot less valuable. He pulled out of the deal, and Twitter is suing in court to force him to buy the company now. Well, based on a couple of tweets that Musk has made, this is exactly what he wanted to happen. They did, and he tweeted that first they didn't want him to buy the company. Now they're trying, and then they wouldn't release the bot numbers. Now they want to force him to buy the company. But to do this, they're going to have to reveal those bot numbers in court. So now the Twitter board is between a rock and a hard place. And I think no matter which side wins, I still think Elon Musk is going to end up buying Twitter. But now the Twitter board and CEO, the heads of the company will also be, held accountable, because now they've got to release those numbers in court. So either A, they stick to their story, lie in court, and get nailed for perjury, or B, they reveal the real numbers and they get caught in an SEC investigation because they've been lying to shareholders.
I would agree. A complete rock and a hard place. Master negotiation move by Musk. But there's also another issue I'd like you to comment on. We talked about Donald J. Trump. You had a potential ally, okay, in Musk with Trump. He's already said that he's going to vote Republican. Maybe, it might not be as big. It could have been a positive for Trump. What does Trump do? Call him a big bullshitter. It's just like reminiscent of like how much stupid shit can you do, Trump?
Trump has done that for decades. Before he was ever in politics, when he was just in real estate, he would call other billionaires and millionaires names. He never had any respect for them because, and it's the same thing that tripped him up as a politician, he can't get out of the way of his own ego. He can't stand that he's not the smartest man in the room. And Jesse Waters on the Five yesterday talked about doing an interview with Elon Musk. And he said, when you ask Elon Musk a question, Elon Musk is thinking about the answer to the question, thinking,
I saw that.
Thinking about how to add cobalt to the batteries in the Tesla and Solar Cities thing, trying to figure out cold fusion. He's got all of that going on at the same time. The fact of the matter is, I mean, you put Musk and Trump in the same room, there's no competition. I mean,
but why would you want to alienate the Henry Ford of this era? He's and you get like aggravated by this guy. Will you just shut up?
Yeah,
I think he could shoot the Republican. He could snatch victory. Snatch defeat in the jaws of victory.
Yes, and he did in 2020. He cannot get out of the way of his own ego. All of this is now the only reason that he's even considering running again is because he cannot accept that he lost in 2020. It's not about what's good for the American people. It's about his ego. And he went after Elon Musk for the same reason. Now, there's probably also another underlying reason that's sort of been buried. Trump is a major investor in Truth Social. And there has been speculation when he said he was not going to go back to Twitter, that's actually in his contract with Truth Social. So now he's tied to this little mouse of a social platform. Now, I'm on Truth Social. In fact, Carnivore Bites is available on Truth Social. But it's a tiny little echo chamber. It does not have the number of members that Twitter and Facebook and Instagram does. And quite frankly, it's never going to. But that's where he's tied to. So between not being, he didn't want to come out and say, well, I can't go back to Twitter. So he lets his ego lead and decides to insult Musk.
100%. But it does bring back the nightmares that was Donald Trump. I remember in another, I heard a commentary, he'd have the greatest policy at 10 o'clock in the morning. By 12, he'd screw it up by texting or tweeting about the waitress at Denny's being a fat pig or something. It's like, what?
I mean, the best description I've ever heard about Trump, and I've said this on the podcast numerous times, is he did the right thing in the worst possible way. And that's because he can't get out of the way of his own ego. He didn't listen to people. And I was actually having a conversation with a very smart economist about Trump. He's not a Trump supporter, but he said the big problem is that Trump never made the adaptation he needed. He still tried to do everything like a CEO, and government isn't set up that way. And Trump refused to adapt.
I would agree, but I will say in closing on the whole Trump thing, the only thing I can say in his defense, from the beginning, he was up against amazing forces, the whole dossier, fake impeachments. So he never had a honeymoon period where he could maybe mature into the job.
No, there was never a honeymoon period. They were going after him even before he was the nominee.
And I think that did eventually make him become increasingly unhinged.
Absolutely, because unlike politicians who have worked in politics for years and decades, he did not have allies. So he had nobody protecting his back, and he was getting it from all sides. And again, to be completely fair, I don't know a lot of people who could have gone through everything that they threw at him without getting paranoid, without getting a little bit, crazy.
And I think that's what happened in the election. He just lost a grip. So moving on, the abortion debate continues. As someone that is hell bent on reversing Biden and at least putting the tweezers on him. I think that I'm totally fixated on having a midterm wave, some type of wave to prevent further destruction. And I was very concerned about Roe versus Wade and the abortion issue, but it hasn't had the traction that I thought it would in the Democratic Party. Yeah, the crazies are out there. I get it. Identifying where the chief justices are, the justices are, but it has an effect. I'm not naive, but not the effect I thought it would.
No, it's not. It's not having the effect the Democrats thought it would, because the banner for pro-choice has unfortunately been picked up by the wackos on the left, not the more centrist Democrats who would be willing to say, yes, we should have abortion, but we should have limits to it. The left has gone absolutely nuts. And again, they're making threats. They're going to have violent protests. And the other thing that's happening is, first of all, the left is actually pushing people away with their actions. If they had actually shut up, thought about it, and moved forward with a conscientious plan to get pro-choice politicians elected, this might have been a very different picture. But they didn't do that. Instead, they went nuts. And it's very clear that the Democrats, despite the fact that the decision was leaked, had no plan for what to do after. That's why they're throwing out the stupidity of, well, we're going to put up tent hospitals in national parks
and floating abortion barges.
Floating abortion barges in the Gulf of Mexico.
And I'll say one, but I want to interject one thing is I don't see, you talk about the crazy, and there were nutcase crazies, I get it, no question about it. But I don't see the summer of 2020. I think it is kind of a whimper, and I'm certainly not encouraging that to happen. But I don't see it on the news every day. Going crazy in the White House, or it's been very isolated.
Yeah, no, because they're finding they don't have the power and influence that they thought they had. They thought they were going to call for violence, and everybody was going to jump up and take control. But here's the thing.
So wait a second. They put out invitations for a party and no one came, correct?
Yes. Essentially, that's what happened. And the Democrats are actually facing a problem that they never expected. And that's the fact that, as always, they actually underestimated the intelligence of the American voter. And more moderate Democrats are looking at what's going on, and they're actually saying, well, wait a minute. You're saying we have to elect you so you can protect Roe v. Wade. You had 50 years to do this, and you've done nothing.
Actually, Kamala was asked that question, and she had not even a word salad. I would say a buffet of word salads. It was like, it was like what it was, Ralph Crampton on The Honeymooners.
Mainstream Democrats are realizing that to Democratic politicians, Roe v. Wade is a campaign issue. It's a way to raise money. They don't have any intention of doing anything about it. And in fact, because of the wording of the Supreme Court decision, even if you elect Democratic Congress people, even if the Democrats managed to hold on to the House and take one or two seats in the Senate so that they had an absolute majority, anything Congress passes at this point is going to be overturned in the courts, because the courts said this has to be decided by the states. So if you're a pro-choice activist, where you should be paying attention is who is in your state legislature. Congress at this point, in terms of abortion, has been neutered. This is going to be done state by state. And if you want abortion in your state, elect pro-choice people into your state legislature. And then you will have abortions depending on what is voted on in your state. That's not enough for the far left, because as far as the far left is concerned, everybody needs to do what they say.
Well, I'll even say this: to me, it's not even an issue. It's a minor inconvenience. If you were someone looking for an abortion, a person that can potentially give birth, not a woman, but a potential birther, which we all are, Dr. Lopkin. I'm sure there'll be a federal program that reimburses you for the trip, and I'm dead serious about that. So if you're in Mississippi and you want to go to, South Carolina or North Carolina, there'll be some program, and I'm dead serious about that.
They're actually they've actually been talking about that, but there's a lot of pushback against that, because first of all, that would be a federal law to enable people to break state law, essentially. So that's problematic at best. But also, there is a lot of pushback to using taxpayer money in that way. Now, here's the thing. There are a lot of states that are protecting the right of a woman to have an abortion. There are very few locations that are that far away from some place that you can get an abortion if that is what you want. More importantly,
I would agree
there
with
are
you.
businesses.
I still think that there will be some, either you can get a tax credit. There'll be some way
that there's no right now there's no way they can get that passed in Congress. And if the Republicans win, there's going to be no way to get that passed in Congress for at least the next 2 years, possibly 4.
Okay, we'll see how that plays out. But we do agree
that's it. They're talking about it. They're talking about it, but they just even within the Democratic Party, they have not been able to get the votes to support that move.
But we do agree that it hasn't had the political traction that at least I thought it would.
No, because again, the wackos on the left are sort of, pushing people away from it. And as active as the folks on the left are and adamant that they want pro-choice, the folks on the pro-life side are just as adamant, and they tend to cancel each other out.
Very good. Interesting. Now, you remember the old adage, like father like son? Well, this would be wife like husband. Doctor, and I emphasize Dr. Joe Biden, the doctor in education, basically said Hispanics, Hispanic X, which is something that most Hispanics find repulsive, that name, demeaning. And she was at this convention. She says, well, you Hispanics are as diverse as breakfast tacos.
Yeah, it was an amazing statement for her to make. And of course, the left came out to defend her. And even the people in the audience laughed. But my God, if this had been sent by a Trump, everybody would have been up in arms. And Ted Cruz, you were talking about Ted Cruz earlier.
Yeah, I love his tweet.
Ted Cruz had the best tweet, and he says, no, you've gotten it wrong. It's TACX. You got to put the X on the end of it.
No, it's just, when things go crappy in life and in business, and in this case politically, shit just rolls downhill, doesn't it? You can't do anything right, and this is indicative of that. And last thing in closing, we talked about the midterms, and they're already kind of sending out signal flares that the inflation number for the second quarter will not be pretty.
Yeah, the White House is already trying to cushion the blow. We're expecting another high number. And in fact, on one of Xvidio's other podcasts, Raw Naked Truth, I was actually talking about this today with Chris Calandra. And the fact of the matter is, even if the inflation rate goes down, let's say it magically manages to hit 7%. Nobody's expecting it to be that low. But even if it manages to hit that and Biden tries to take, a victory lap about that, it's still ridiculously high. So
I would agree with that, but I think on the flip side, if it's closer to 9, that we talk about all these, because it is, his presidency is flickering, that could be the kill switch.
It could be. And remember, over the last 2 months, we've seen producer price index over 10. And that's the precursor to the consumer price index. Both of those index numbers will be coming out later this week. But so it is very possible that once again, inflation could go up. Remember, we were at 8.6% last month. Even if it just goes to 8.7 or 8.8, it just shows that Biden has no clue what's going on. We're still having supply chain issues because, Buttigieg.
Oh, Mayor Petey, little cutie mayor.
It's more important for him to take his paternity leave.
There you go. 2 months, by the way.
Yes, and put speed cameras on federal highways than it is to actually do your job and figure out what's going on.
And also go to a meeting with the with SUVs, and then 3 blocks before the meeting, magically pull out a 12-speed bike and little mayor bike to the meeting. But he didn't know there were cameras watching.
Didn't know the cameras were following his motorcade, and these gas-guzzling SUVs, he shows up at the meeting on the bike, not realizing that the cameras had been tracking him the whole time, showing him for the hypocrite he is.
And by the way, sometimes you get opportunities, sometimes you lose opportunities. He was given an opportunity, and he pissed it away. I think he has very little political oomph left.
No, and that's the sad state of the Democratic Party, because when they're talking about people who can replace Biden, Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg are the names most often floated. And these are two absolutely incompetent people.
Oh, no, I agree with you. It's like, who's going to charter your next vessel? The captain of the Titanic or the Lusitania? Name him.
Yes, exactly. That's
well, Dr. Lopkin, great show. And we're continuing to grow and grow, aren't we?
We are. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about these issues? What's of concern to you? Let us know by going to xvadio.com/connect and tell us what's on your mind. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you next time.